President Harry Truman was never one to mince words. Thus, he bluntly described the War of 1812 as the silliest damn war we ever had. At the time it was fought, it was often referred to as Mr. Madison's War, a disparaging reference to the president, though he actually tried to avoid the conflict. It was but one of many ironies of the war. Quite simply, the War of 1812 was a quixotic and curious affair. It was a war that lasted 2.5 years, but was named for only one of them. It was seen by its supporters as America's second war for independence. After all, had the Americans lost, they may have been subjugated again by the British. On the other hand, had the Americans won, it is possible Canada would have become part of the United States. However, in the end, the affair was a costly and complicated tie. And despite the bloodshed and ill will, both the Canadian-American border and relations between the British and the Americans remained virtually unchanged. Although the fighting during the first 2 years of the conflict was, for the most part, restricted to the border between the two countries, it was a continental war. Armies regularly crossed the Canadian border, sailed up and down the Niagara and St. Lawrence rivers, and battled on Lakes Champlain, Erie, and Ontario. Hostilities extended to the American Northwest at Lakes Huron and Michigan, southeast to the Chesapeake Bay, and as far south as the mouth of the mighty Mississippi River. On the seas, warships prowled the waters off the coasts of the Azores and Ireland in the eastern Atlantic, Brazil in the western Atlantic, Cuba in the Caribbean, and even the far reaches of the uncharted Pacific Ocean. It was a war fought by inexperienced and poorly provisioned soldiers on both sides. To supplement the insufficient numbers, the Americans relied on militia units that often proved to be undisciplined, unruly, and ultimately unreliable. The war's violence and mismanagement periodically spilled over into civilian populations, as would be the case during the attack on Washington. Throughout the war, commercial ships were sunk, villages sacked, and unarmed locals harassed. British warships along the Chesapeake and nearby rivers repaid the sins, purposely targeting towns and farms with their naval guns. On the frontier, native populations were slaughtered. In turn, surrendering soldiers were massacred by Indian warriors. Such behavior marred any glory that might be gained in the fight. One of the tragic casualties of the war was the impact on indigenous peoples. Native American nations, often in conflict with one another and divided over their loyalties to the two warring powers, found themselves caught in the middle.